Welcome, everybody, to AWS's Howdy partner, Andrew. Take it away.
Welcome to another episode of Howdy Partner. Today we got some heavy hitters, and this is a show where we like to highlight some of the cool things that our partners are doing. And today we have Splunk with us. And so today we'll be talking to you about everything Control Tower, everything Splunk, and how you can integrate the two to manage all of your organizational accounts in your AWS environments. And so my name is Andrew Park. I'm a partner solutions architect here with AWS. And with me as my co-host, I have Yang Zheng, who is also a partner solutions architect here with AWS. And today we have a new friend, Cam from Splunk. Today will be talking to us about the solution from Splunk that integrates with AWS Control Tower. And I will leave that to him to discuss later in the show. But if this is your first time tuning into the show, make sure to like and subscribe for regular updates. And with that said, Yang, talk to us about Control Tower and why it's important for your AWS environments.
Yeah, let's take it away to my screen. I guess before we talk about Control Tower, we have to discuss this idea of, multi-account strategy or multi-account environment. So as you as an organization progress through either in your business or your cloud adoption, you ultimately come to this conclusion that, having a single account just isn't enough. And as you can see on the screen, there may be many reasons why you come to that conclusion. So starting with, your business just having too many teams for you to be able to just utilize a single account. And these teams kind of lead into different business processes. It could be different business units, such as finance team or security team or auditing team, or, it might just be based on different products that you're working on. So those two kind of go hand in hand in determining that, hey, we might need more than a single account to be able to incorporate all these different teams. And with these different teams come different, different user profiles that is just going to have to lead to some sort of an isolation between different teams and different accounts. And with that, you also have a different security controls that may be required based on different applications that different teams might be working on. And last but not least, things like billing could be considered when you are dealing with, how much is a different team, team A spending on different services versus team B. So with all those reasons and having to deal with creating different accounts, you might think about, well, what accounts should I create? And here's an example of what different accounts might look like. On the left, you have an account that's dedicated to archiving security logs for all the other accounts that you may have. And you have other different accounts such as security, networking, shared services, where it's dealing with different services that might be shared between different accounts. As well as if you're breaking down into different teams, you might have a production account, development account, pre-prod or staging, as you might call it. Of course, billing account, sandbox, where you kind of test different things out within a separate development unit, and many other accounts that you may have that you might think is necessary. So with those different accounts, we have a recommended approach that we usually recommend to different partners here. And they're separated into different, major accounts. You have the core accounts, which, as you've seen from the previous screen, deals with, core things within your business functionalities. Things like security, accounts that deal with security logs, that is more or less about CloudTrail logs and things like that. Accounts that deal with networking, and again, shared services between different accounts. And on the bottom left, you see a development accounts where there might be some sandboxing going on. And within your different teams or different groups, you have a basic structure of a production account, development account, pre-production account, or staging. And you have within a single team, team shared services where it's an account that handles different services that are shared between prod, pre-prod, and dev accounts. And as you can see with the separate arrows, you have different networking paths between different accounts. Obviously, the blue dotted arrow is showing all the accounts logs being sent to that log archiving account. And you have some optional network path that we recommend as you see fit. But as you can see, there's a lot of moving parts when you're talking about setting multi-account environment. And customers more often than not run into different challenges. These are the main challenges that you see. With the design that you come up with when you're taking this multi-account approach, there may be many decisions that you have to make just based on how detailed you want to be, how you want to divvy up these different accounts based on the way your business is structured. And with the complexity that comes with setting up these multi-accounts, you more often than not run into having to set up different policies for different accounts and services based on what rights do they need to which services, and so on and so forth. And setting up these accounts isn't just about setting them up. It is about managing them as you increase or decrease accounts, or as you are managing different compliances through different changes that you see. So to help customers kind of face these challenges, we have this wonderful service called the AWS Control Tower. So AWS Control Tower is a service we have here at AWS that exactly solves this multi-account approach problem, where it will launch what we call a landing zone, and I will cover that in a little bit, where you can basically set up your accounts automatically with the click of a button. And usually it comes with prepackaged what we call guardrails, policies, compliances, different security measures to be able to enforce different policies, and then on top of that, detect violation if one occurs. And you are able to all see all these compliances and things that work with dashboards. Going a little bit more detailed into some of the features and benefits, again, this kind of separates the control tower into two different sections, for lack of a better word. We have the account setup side where you can automate launching of these landing zones, where managing your multi-account is based on AWS organizations. And you leverage AWS Service Catalog to be able to provision accounts very easily. And of course, there are central logging and configuration that are provided with consistency that you would expect. And with the guardrail side of things, again, we're looking at built-in best practices as far as security measures, compliances, and these guardrails break into two main components: preventive and detective. And they should be pretty straightforward. One is preventing things from happening. One is being able to detect if things are going, out of compliance. And again, you are able to use dashboard and being able to use notification to, detect these configurations and compliance issues. Here are some of the underlying services that make up the control tower. On the account management side, again, multi-account management is heavily based on organizations. Service Catalog is used to create the accounts. This is called Account Factory, which I will talk about in a little bit. And CloudFormation is utilized to be able to set those guardrail policies and compliances. And there is an optional way to incorporate SSO, or single sign-on, for users and accounts. And on the guardrail side is your usual AWS security service suspects. You got CloudTrail, CloudWatch, all within a security hub. Of course, config for the compliance config rules. And then Lambda is utilized there for things like notifications and so forth. And last couple bits of items that I want to kind of cover and go over with Control Tower is first is the idea of automated landing zone. This is the pre-configured account blueprint, so to speak. And on the diagram you see there, the core component of the landing zone are those core OU, custom OU. Under the core organization units, you have the log archiving account and then audit account for cross-account access. Under the custom OU is the accounts that you will provision using the service catalog or the account factory. And the stat sets are, CloudFormation stat sets are there to enforce the pre-configured compliances and security policies. And as you can see, it also comes with the option to use single sign-on. And the last bit that I want to go over on a top level overview is the account factory. Again, it is for controlling how to provision your accounts using service catalog. And you can provision based on these account baselines that come with VPC options, or you can use pre-approved configuration options. This is just a way for you to be able to provision accounts very easily. And with that, as you can see, Control Tower has a lot of features, and it's very easy to use for different partners, customers, organizations to be able to manage your multi-account approach for the environment that you have on AWS. And on top of that, and I guess this kind of leads into Cam's presentation here, is to use Splunk as an integration service to kind of, I guess, improve your usage for account Control Tower. So with that, why don't we go to Cam, and Cam, you can kind of take it away from here.
Cool. Thank you so much. Great job, Young. And first of all, thank you everybody for allowing me to be a part of this. This is going to be a lot of fun. I wanted to, first of all, share a couple things. I've been with Splunk now over 8 years, and this is actually a fun project that I got to work on as a part of my principal project. It was a lot of fun collaborating with Amazon. We built this from the ground up to integrate with organizations and control. We actually have a blog post, which I think is also on the one of the links that we have out there. It kind of walks you through the whole process of what we did, what we imagined here. So we obviously understand a lot of our customers are going down this path that they have many accounts in an organization. They're leveraging something like Control Tower to be able to help kind of vend accounts and kind of create this whole process. But one of the problems they still have is collecting the data from those accounts and bringing it into Splunk. So what we did is we went and I keep saying we because there are quite a few people that I work with to make this actually go through. So I want to make sure I call them out. So there are 3 main engineers that I work with over at Splunk. Skylar Taylor, Nick Stone, and Mayor. They were all just instrumental in getting this thing off the ground. It was an idea that we had back in the day. We had a project called Project Trumpet that leveraged CloudFormation templates and set up AWS services to get data into Splunk. what we did was then extended that and added a UI inside of Splunk, a Splunk app, that allowed us to now start collecting that data, but start deploying from Splunk and then collecting the data into Splunk. So, just a couple of very quick things. I like going into this presentation mode because this is a lot easier. I will be potentially saying things that are future statements, so I have to say this so the lawyers don't get at me. So just make sure everyone reads that real quick. Very quickly, I want to kind of go over what Splunk is. I'm pretty sure most of the people here know what it is. I want to just briefly touch on our Splunk Cloud as a service. It helps a lot of our customers that already have Splunk or are looking to use Splunk facilitate that as a service. The actual control tower integration, and then what that enables, which is this Splunk and AWS better together story. So at a high level, Splunk is basically a solution that allows you, and I've been with Splunk long enough to it be called the Google for logs, the machine data platform, lots of things. What it effectively is a way to collect data at scale, any data source, any data type, any format, whether structured or unstructured, and just gives you the ability to search it. Helps with security use cases. That's what a lot of people know us for, but we're also very well known for application, IT operations, app delivery. If you get high enough in the stack, business analytics. One of my favorites is just being able to use Splunk for things that people don't really know that they could use it for. We had a company, this is a long time ago, but still very relevant. They took data from their elevators. And you'd think, why would you be Splunking an elevator? And the reason is because they were looking to see where people were getting on and off. This is a real estate company. So if you think about it, if they know what floors are popular and what floors aren't popular, they might be able to actually surmise where the customers are going, where the customers aren't going, and who's going to be, potentially leaving their real estate company. So with that, they're able to actually predict rents and who's going to be popular, who's going to stick around, who's not going to be around, all using Splunk. I mean, very interesting. And there's tons of those kind of use cases that we just don't even plan for. But because it's all unstructured data, you can start playing with it. Another very valuable and very pertinent use case is doing something where you have a bunch of disparate tools, a lot of different people are doing things, and if you want to leverage platforms so that everyone can actually collaborate and actually make sense of the data together, Splunk is a perfect platform for that. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of you who know who Splunk is through our t-shirts. And I can't tell you how many awesome t-shirts we have and how many we've actually had to retire. But if you ever see us at one of the big trade shows, our .conf will be out here soon. We do have a lot of very cool stuff that we usually go out and do with that. There is going to be a talk on this particular integration with Control Tower. So there's a session for Control Tower. So I just want to make sure that that's out there. Definitely feel free to ping me or whomever else about this. And so that's basically what Splunk is. And our Splunk cloud service is effectively just running Splunk on AWS, but running it as a service. So a lot of our customers get fast time to value, eliminate the infrastructure requirements, and then maximize the value of their limited resources. So a lot of their SEs or their engineers or architects, instead of doing the plumbing for Splunk, actually get to see what the data is and actually get stuff done. So we take, this complex offering and simplify it to something like this, where you just have the only thing you really have to worry about is onboarding data, onboarding users, and getting value from that data. So that leads us to the integration with Control Tower. And why this is important is because it hits a couple of those components, onboarding data and getting value from the data. And the reason why this is important is because a lot of people that try to collect data from AWS, especially at scale, especially with all these hundreds of AWS accounts, you have to do it in a way that can actually properly work and do it serverlessly as well. So what what the Grand Central Control Tower integration does is it leverages that primary account that we have in the organization, and then leverages stack sets to first thing we do is we actually discover all the AWS accounts underneath the organization. And then we deploy stack sets to these accounts. And with those stack sets deployed is basically a CloudFormation template that gets deployed to the individual account, which then configures the services to start sending data into Splunk using Kinesis Data Firehose. Now, this solution works in both Splunk Cloud and Splunk Enterprise. So if you were using this as a bring your own license or have your own Splunk deployment, this solution will work for it. As long as you have internet access, it'll work. Obviously, it has to talk to Amazon. To look at it a little bit differently, then this might be a little bit of an eye chart. But what you see is that with the way that we integrate with Control Tower is that we're actually calling APIs and getting data from Amazon. So when you vend an account, when a customer vends an AWS account or has an account in an organization unit or an OU, we're able to deploy CloudFormation templates based on where that account is. And I'll show all this stuff to you in a demo here in a second. But this is really important because what we can do is we can leverage kind of the trust relationship with the primary account to all the sub accounts to be able to actually push configurations. And depending on where they reside, deploy different types of configurations. So say, for example, you have accounts that are public facing and need to have enhanced security services enabled or collect data collected from those enhanced accounts. You can deploy one that'll collect Macy, Guard Duty, Security Hub, the findings, etc. Whereas if you have another account that's like a developer account that is not public facing, you can just deploy the standard config. So just config CloudTrail and CloudWatch logs. And definitely feel free to ask questions on the chat. I'm happy to answer them as well. So AWS organizations, I see that there's a question there, is really something about like a way to organize your AWS deployment. So I can actually show you what it actually looks like inside an account. So here's my master account with AWS, and an organization is where all your accounts kind of roll up into one visualization, right? So if you think about it, it's a way just to manage all of your many accounts and also help understand whether those accounts should reside. So if you have a compliance organization unit, you can add your compliance accounts in there. If you're DevOps, you can add accounts to there. So this framework is what allows you to kind of manage all these hundreds of accounts. And there are lots of, thankfully, great APIs that we can leverage in Splunk to start mining that data out of these organizations and these accounts. So coming back into Splunk, the first page I want to show is that in the Splunk app, which you can download, it kind of walks you through all these different so configuration deck is for configuration of data, templates, pull and search. Obviously, all the hyperlinks are there. I also have links to the project itself. So here's a GitHub code. So it'll take you to this lovely GitHub page where you can see kind of the how-to and where to install it, how to install it, configuring, etc. It also shows you the AWS services that we're leveraging and kind of the concepts and documentation there. It has the same documentation, so if you want to use this for your own presentation internally, feel free. And then here's the fun part. Now I get to go and configure my Amazon Web Services and start getting data out of Amazon. So the very first thing that I do, and I've already done this, is I've created a master account. So you add the new organization, add in the account ID, give it an account name, an access key, secret key, and then the account shows up here. The next step is you need this to land somewhere. So the data is actually being collected from Amazon and being sent into Splunk serverlessly, so over HTTP event collector. So that will require you to set up an endpoint. And so you just put in the account name. This can be anything from cloud. I call it like the data source type, so CloudTrail, Config, CloudWatch, an HTTP endpoint, and then my tokens for the event collector. And so here is my endpoint. This is a Splunk Cloud deployment. So by default, it has this as a DNS name. So your HTTP inputs, firehose, and then the account name. And now I stopped and said, okay, now what I want to do is I want to create a stack set for it. So I'm going to go in and create a new stack set. Just leverage the primary account that I created. It'll automatically go in and collect from, or it'll automatically depend on this. It'll create a stack set inside of the CloudFormation stack set screen based on the OUs. So for example, I'm going to create one for compliance. I can create multiple if I wanted to. Give it a name. Now this is key, and I'll show you why this is key. You have to have the precursor Grand Central, because the way that I built the IAM policy, this is configurable, but this is the way I set it by default, is that it won't do any CloudFormation template deployments without there being a prefix of Grand Central. So it just helps kind of lock down on resource utilization. So you're not giving it star resource utilization across all your AWS deployment. And then you give it a name. So this one's going to be CloudTrail. And the only one I care about at this point is US East 1. I can create multiple regions, but for now, we'll just keep it as US East 1. I come down here and I say, well, I want it to go to my CloudTrail endpoint. So it's tied to my tokens. Since I'm not doing any custom templates, I'm just using the standard ones that are right here, quickly available. I'm going to go ahead and leave that as default. Turn off config notifications. And there's CloudTrail, and I'm good to go. Just a couple things to note. If I wanted to add like VPC flow logs, if I know the group name, I can add that group name here. Again, if I know CloudWatch log group names, I can add them here as well. Or if I'm looking at CloudWatch events, so for example, anything from like guard duty to security hub, oops, that was not there anymore. But any of these other various CloudWatch events, we can actually collect them as well. So when that's all said and done, before I click next, I'm going to show you inside of CloudFormation. You see here, these are all the standard cloud stack sets that when you deploy Control Tower are enabled. So now if I go to Grand Central and I click Deploy, I go back to the CloudFormation, hit the lovely refresh button, and there it is, Grand Central CloudTrail. So what this is doing is this is actually communicating back and forth. So this app doesn't need to sit on a heavy forward. You can put it anywhere you want, to be honest. Search heads are totally fine because it's not technically doing any data inputs. It's just doing API calls out to AWS to configure and start collecting data. So while that's going on, we can kind of show what's going on behind the scenes. If you go to the stack instances, you'll see these are all the stack instances that are currently inside of my compliance OU. So there are only 2 of them. And if I were to go to any of these accounts, go log into this account, go into CloudFormation, and we see the stack set creating inside of that account. So this will actually go in and actually do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. So in this case, we're doing a CloudTrail deployment. So it's actually going to be going in and creating S3 buckets, IAM roles, and then creating the link between a CloudWatch event and subscribing to it via Kinesis Data Firehose. So it does all of that work for you. And this is the work that we created with Trumpet. So you'll see like words Trumpet strewn about to be able to leverage this data collection. So that's actually happening right now within this account without me having to do any of that work. I'm just in Splunk making the modifications, adding the stack set for that to happen. And then down here, we can see all the wonderful accounts that we have under management. What state they're in, how long they've been part of the organization. One of the kind of legacy before Control Tower, the integration with Control Tower, if we wanted to do the account, the credential kind of back and forth, we went in and we could do a bulk credential upload, and then that would also configure these accounts. But this approach using stack sets and using that shared account is much better and a lot less of a pain to manage and maintain access keys, secret keys, etc. So, good question.
I think we have a question in the chat. So what happens if you create a new account that's not in that list?
Very good question. So by default, what will happen, and let me just get this back up here. If you create a new account, so if you vend a new account using Control Tower, and you're using, and you're effectively just adding that account to an OU, by adding the account to an OU, it'll automatically kick off the job to start adding the controls that we put around it. So all the work that we did here in this stack set would be deployed to that particular account. So I can show you an example of this. So what I'll do is over here in my master account, I'm going to go to my organization. I'm going to go to my view here, go into sales, just randomly pick any of these accounts. I can pick multiple if I wanted to, and say move to compliance. And what will happen now is if I go to my CloudFormation template and my stack set, here's this over here. We go to operations. Well, you'll see it's currently queued, but what's going to happen is as these accounts, there you go. So as these accounts start to come in, it'll automatically deploy the CloudFormation template to those particular accounts. So the good news is, as an admin, you set this up once in this stack set method, you don't have to set it up again. It'll automatically, as the accounts get vended, get those controls put into place. So this is leveraging similar technology or similar technique that was used by the Control Tower piece, but done through a Splunk UI. So it gives you that visibility.
Perfect. And then before we go to the next question in chat, for those just tuning in, this is Howdy Partner. This is a show where we like to highlight some of the cool things that our partners are doing. And today on the show, we have Splunk. And Cam is walking us through the Grand Central integration with AWS Control Tower. So if this is your first time on the show, make sure to like and subscribe for regular updates. And so with that said, we do have another question in chat. So if you're in need of CloudFormation, what's the difference between a stack and stack set? Is that like a nested template or something?
Good question. So what we've done, and there are differences between the two, just by looking at the actual CloudFormation component itself. The stacks are your standard CloudFormation templates. So if you're to go in and you're to create a standard CloudFormation template and deploy it, for example, I have one that creates my account, which creates my user account, attaches the right policy to it, and gives me the access key, secret key that I need to start this whole process off. Stack sets are actually, you're able to leverage this from the primary account to then deploy out to your sub accounts. And this leverages a shared kind of a shared service to be able to communicate with the accounts that are inside of the organization that you don't have like an access key, secret key, or shared assume role kind of capability automatically built. You have to establish one that's automatically built in using the controls in place. And if you actually read the documentation, thankfully the documentation for this is actually very good. And I actually called it out here inside of the GitHub repo. This goes into kind of a lot more detail as to where this is all being done. And this is all leveraged, again, using that CloudFormation stack set org admin. So it's able to go in and create the CloudFormation templates within the accounts from the primary account. So that's kind of the main
one thing I like to add about. Oh, sorry, I'm cutting you off. One thing I like to add about the cool thing about using stack sets with this integration specifically is that if you have accounts that are cross-region and you need to deploy resources that need to be able to go cross-region, stack sets also allow you to do that as well. So just another cool thing about this specific integration, leveraging stack sets. So hopefully that answers your question.
Cool. Yeah, and the whole point of this is that at the end of the day, what people really want to be able to do is kind of set it up and make sure that they have that data flowing in, that they have the right resources coming into Splunk. I really enjoy the fact that this is automated and you don't have to leverage a lot of resources to get this off the ground. This is pretty well integrated into the whole architecture of Amazon. It's leveraging the Boto SDK behind the scenes, and it's using CloudFormation templates to get this done. And I've tested it up to 100 accounts. I know that if you want to go test it higher, go for it, let me know. Curious to see how much farther it can go, but it works pretty well so far. So,
guys, I do have a question. So with this specific integration, so you just talked about how you've tested it all the way up to 100 accounts. Are there any limits or specifications that folks need to be conscious of when they are using this solution?
Yeah. So obviously, the first and foremost, you have to have the proper access to your AWS account and your organization, and be able to be a control tower admin. Beyond that, I mean, it's basically the standard hooks apply. Splunk is going to do all the heavy lifting for you. You just install the app, give it the right permissions, in this case, this primary account, and make sure you just add the accounts of the organization into your Splunk deployment, which will all show up here then, and then just go. And it'll start going out and collecting data from those different data sources.
Solid. And I kind of wish we had Mo on the on the show today to answer this question. But another question is, can I link this organization Splunk solution with EventBridge?
Yeah. So I know that back in the day, as CloudWatch events is kind of the way that we're doing things. So down here in the CloudWatch events, right now it's kind of going through the path of the traditional CloudWatch events. I think, and this is bring into the futures, we can probably work on kind of building more integrations into the event bridge component itself and add more events so that we can start collecting those into Splunk as well. So a couple more things just wanted to cover, make sure I did before I go to another one. We do have the ability to bring in templates. So customers who have maybe are familiar with this whole deployment, and they may have created their own templates back in the day when it was called Trumpet, you can bring those into Splunk and have them available into Grand Central and have them available for deployment. So it does give you that capability. We do have a dashboard that we created a long time ago, and it helps kind of determine what the costs are going to be for doing a push versus pull model. So say, for example, you have a terabyte license in Splunk, and you have 150 AWS accounts, and you're doing everything in Northern Virginia, and you're doing it all on an M5 4XL. So you're going to need 3 of them. Assuming 10% license utilization, so you're assuming 10% of this terabyte is AWS data. This is roughly the difference in cost between setting up heavy forwarders to pull the data as opposed to pushing the data using Kinesis Data Firehose. It does break down the costs. These are obviously I erred on the side of higher rather than lower. I also did high availability, so I did additional heavy forwarders, not only those 3, but if you want to just do straight up 3, there's your actual cost as far as hardware is concerned. Again, on-demand pricing, so discounts and doing reserved instances and all that stuff don't apply. And then if you want to tweak the amount of data that you're sending, say you're a more SaaS level provider, this will obviously manipulate how much additional resources you're going to need, et cetera, to do it. So, yeah. And then lastly, here's your observation deck. There's a train theme going on, which is why Grand Central observation deck. You'll see here that I have the number of accounts that I have under management, the data collection. This one's not hooked up to the data collection piece, so it's not going to show it, but it'll show you all the accounts that do need to be added into, that are missing deployments. And then it'll show you if you're getting config data or CloudTrail data, what regions are sending data in. I do have it in another view, but this gives you that capability. And all this, there's also some saved searches behind the scenes that will automatically send emails, since the AWS account is tied to an email. As you add them in, it'll fire off an email to those accounts, letting them know, hey, I see that you're now part of this organization. Would you like to be added to Splunk? So if you wanted to have that as a step in your process, you can go in and start collecting or start letting them know to add themselves into Splunk.
I think we have another question in chat. So how would you add those deployments if they are missing?
Good question. So a couple ways of doing it, either through the AWS UI, where you go to the organization and add them into an OU that has that you created the stack set for. So that'd be the first way of doing it. If you wanted to manually add them in, this is where like the legacy version of the 1.0 version of Grand Central allows you to do this, where you can actually go in and pick the account that you want to add under management and literally just go edit and then add the access key, secret key, and add it to management. If you had hundreds of these accounts, what you could do is we actually have a little cheat that allows you to take all these credential files, so the credentials.csv or update.csv, whatever those the files are that you create when you create the IAM user. You add them all together. We have a Python script called credential smusher that'll concatenate them all into one file. You upload it here, and it'll then automatically go and add the access key, secret key to all the AWS accounts. So if you don't have organizations enabled and you wanted to use this, technically you could do it that way. Although I would strongly encourage you to leverage Control Tower in organizations. You're going to make your life a lot easier. But if you have like 5 or 6 accounts and you just kind of want to work around with it, you could totally do that.
Okay, and then would you get config drift by importing manually?
So that's a good question. It depends on how this is going to be architected. With respect to the data that's being collected, you could, well, it depends on the config drift. Let me just back up a little bit. So from the AWS config side, you will be able to get just want to make sure this is clear, you would be able to set up, config notifications, so you can actually get actual config changes that are happening within the accounts. Now, if you're talking about config drift as far as, hey, this is now part of a new organization unit or a different component, yes, you can get some level of config drift, but I don't think it's explicitly called out. That'd be something I would probably create a search for it to find I hope that answers your question if you want to clarify it. So what this does is now that we have the data flowing in, inside of Splunk, you can go in and start looking at the CloudTrail data, and you'll start to see the data start to flow in. You'll have all the different accounts that are sending its data in. If you then go into the Splunk app for AWS, which is also a link that we have inside the Splunk-based link that we have for your deployment, you'll be able to see things like this. You'll be able to see your number of deployments, number of VPCs that you have, as well as overall usage of your AWS infrastructure. A great visualization that we have is a one for topology. So we can take a lot of that data, go back in time, and it'll actually start showing, this is a lovely demo instance, it'll start showing all the different AWS accounts and kind of what state all of our instances are in. Any particular tags you're looking for, it'll start pulling those in so you can start looking at that. And then visually display it in a nice, easy to kind of understand way. And if you want to further filter, you can filter on regions or filter on AWS accounts as well.
So this is sort of where you bring all the data that you gather back to Splunk, and then you're able to do analysis and dashboarding and things like that. Correct. Okay.
So yeah, this will all help. And there are certain components that you still need to have, like AWS, the TA, the technology add-on in Splunk parlance, to go out and pull, because there are certain API only in endpoints like description or CloudWatch metrics that you still have to go hit an API to pull into Splunk. So yeah, and that was actually a nice little thunder rumbling.
So we're at almost the top of the hour. Young, who are we? What are we doing? And what are we showing on the show today?
Yeah, for those of you just joining in, this is AWS Howdy Partner. This is a show where we kind of let our partners show off, evangelize, promote whatever your choice of word is, their solution, their product, anything cool they're working on. And today we have Cam Amir from Splunk. He's here to show us Splunk's newest integration with AWS Control Tower, and it's called Grand Central. He just showed us a demo on how to set up the accounts, pull the data, and then the screen that you're looking at right now is he's going back on Splunk and kind of looking at different data on the different accounts that he was just pulling up. So if you haven't, like us, follow us for future episodes as well.
And there are plenty of other use cases that are outside of this app that I'm just very gently scratching the very surface of. You have a lot of security use cases. Obviously, Splunk and security are kind of synonymous these days. We also have a lot of usage and metric driven dashboards. A lot of this is around EC2 utilization. We do have a lot of capacity planners, a lot of things we did back in the day with machine learning, being able to look at your deployment and see where you're overutilizing or underutilizing resources, and then give you prescriptive approaches on how to reclaim some of those resources. A lot of that is also here in the insights. So for example, if you have a lot of miscellaneous or unnecessary security groups, they'll actually tell you, hey, you might want to go delete a lot of those launch-wizard security groups that are just kind of sitting there and could be confusing for others when they start deploying in your AWS account. And obviously, we do have a lot of information around billing to give you the current billing, and also looking at estimates, etc.
And I'm really glad you mentioned security. So if we think about AWS best practices, right? One of the best practices is to send all of your Cloudflare logs to a centralized account that is dedicated to security and auditing. And so Splunk is actually one of the perfect ways to do that because it basically does exactly just that, right? That's one of the use cases. And so really glad to have you on the show because I think a lot of people do forget that you could totally use Splunk to adhere to that best practice. So really glad you brought up security. So that's always important.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about this whole thing is that if you want to be able to look cross account, if you want to look cross region, and you want to see, for example, if you want to look for potentially lateral movement, this could really give you a good kind of understanding of what exactly is happening. A lot of these accounts that I have, thankfully, nothing is happening with them because they are very small and rather dormant. So any activity I do have is going to be kind of, hopefully, very low, or if any kind of activity happening. But this is a great way to set up alerts and alarms. We do have integrations with, obviously, internally inside of Splunk, any kind of SOAR product. So, for example, Phantom, it allows you to do, hey, something happens here, automatically trigger orchestrated response to make sure that either that user gets knocked down or that account gets disabled or what have you. So a lot of really cool things that we can do here with Splunk.
And so I guess there's another anecdote on security. So another reason why you would want this within your environment is that, if you have a dev that decides to go rogue and decides to do Bitcoin mining in the AWS account, or, if someone gets locked out of their organization and everyone loses access, Splunk is obviously a really great way to go back and figure out what happened because you can analyze and look up all the logs from one central place, right? And so obviously if you run into those situations, Splunk will help you kind of get to the bottom of those issues. So another use case that I think people kind of overlook, right, when they're thinking about a centralized logging solution. So yeah, that's always an important one. You don't want to get hit with 100,000 or even more, AWS bill for Bitcoin mining, right? Or Bitcoin mining, right? So that's always important.
Yeah, and the good thing is, like, there's a lot of very cool things. So internally in Splunk, we actually have, as you can imagine, we're a pretty big Splunk or AWS customer. So we have a lot of AWS accounts as well. So being able to view all that data in one central location and also alerts based on people's usage. Hey, did you know that your cost went up from, you normally spend $100 a month, now you're spending $1,200 a month? Is that right? And letting them know that. Sometimes SEs are like, oh, I totally forgot to turn off that workshop or that proof of value or whatever demo that I was running. And, it does add up very quickly.
Very quickly, yeah. Totally. So one thing you talked about was, use cases across different industries or different verticals. And so I know specifically in the container space, if you're using Kubernetes, you can actually deploy Splunk through Helm. So, and I know I've personally seen a lot of other customers and partners kind of take this approach just because it's so easy, and they've already been using Splunk previously before, right? And so I think it's really cool how many different ways you can deploy Splunk into your environment. Yeah, I think just everything that you guys are doing are great. So I think it's awesome.
Thank you. And it helps having partners like AWS that give us, plenty of points to actually hit and actually collect data from, and not be like closed gardens that don't really give us any access to the data. So we appreciate that.
For sure. I think
we actually have a question. Oh, yeah, I was going to mention that we have a question on the chat asking how real time are these records? For example, with the detailed monitoring for CloudWatch being per minute, can we expect Splunk's analysis to be as caught up? Is a question we have on the chat.
That's a good question. So the CloudWatch metrics, specifically, there are two ways of collecting those metrics inside of Splunk. The technology add-on allows you to get that data over, they're all going to be pulls from an API. So the API is going to go in and collect the data directly from CloudWatch. They're near real time. They're not real time. And I would wait here to say that. I mean, for example, we do have SignalFX that is part of the Splunk family that does get real-time data from the CloudWatch metrics piece. Another future statement is obviously bringing them into the fold and having them be part of the whole Splunk UI. That's definitely one of those features that we're working towards. But to answer the question directly, there is a delay, and the delay is based on the polling interval. And obviously, once the data gets into Splunk, it's very quickly indexed. We do have metrics inside of Splunk. So the data is, like I said, near real time, maybe a few seconds or minutes off, but not terribly off.
And here's a question. Which Splunk tool would you take with you on a desert island? Good question.
Let's see. Well, obviously Grand Central, because I mean, I definitely want to get on a train and get out of there.
Totally.
I had a question. I'm just curious, and you may or may not have an answer for this, but this being a more of a recent integration, what kind of use cases are you seeing that are pretty interesting, or what are some interesting use cases that you hope to see in the future as more customers start using Grand Central?
Good question. Obviously, the biggest one is just getting a wrap around all their accounts. Just visibility into the accounts that they have in AWS. I mean, that right there is a significant win. But then things like seeing the amount of logins, so getting the CloudTrail data in and starting to understand who's actively using the accounts, which accounts are dormant, which accounts, you spun up for a developer. They had an application they built. Now they're done. Hey, it might make sense to go look at that account and terminate it or close it down, so that if there are any keys or anything that was over there, you'd be able to make sure that they were disabled and properly put away. So a lot of very easy waste savings. Going in and looking at different accounts, making sure they're being used, all the way to like very interesting things like. Andrew, to your point, getting Kubernetes or getting container data into Splunk, this kind of gives you that capability, because if you are sending it to a CloudWatch log group, or if you want to deploy the Splunk app called Splunk Connect for Kubernetes, that gives you the capability to, again, collect that data over HTTP event collector and send it directly into Splunk and start looking at your containers. So a lot of really cool things as customers are doing this whole digital transformation journey to the cloud. A lot of this is going to enable that move forward.
What about just general best practices if you're going to use Splunk? For folks that are looking for a centralized solution and they haven't made the decision yet. What are some best practices and tips that you can think of off the top of your head that you would give someone that is considering Splunk?
I'm very biased to Splunk Cloud. I would encourage them to go look at the Splunk Cloud solution. I think it's tongue in cheek, but in all honesty, like if you really want to kind of get off the ground quickly and start getting value from your data, Splunk Cloud is probably the best approach. You start sending data into Splunk and you start using it for you don't need to be an enterprise, you don't need to be a security expert, you don't need to be an operations expert. You just need to be a curious individual. I always tell people, look, Splunk it's not limited by technology, it's limited by your imagination. So if you can write a search, and the searches aren't terribly complex, the search language, thankfully, is very traditional, where if you don't know what you're really looking for, you can do things like, hey, I'm looking for the word error or critical. And if I don't know how to spell, I can use star. And then just go search the data. I go look at my internal logs. I might have some there. So there you go. So you can start looking at things and start just looking at the interesting fields that we have and start saying, oh, wow, why is there a web service error or issue there? And just start seeing exactly what those are. And just very easily being able to get to the root cause. I think that's probably the best use case of just core Splunk. But then what we've done with all our premium applications like enterprise security, IT service intelligence, and the whole litany of them that you can find on Splunk base, is that we take a lot of searches and just put them in your hands for dashboards, pre-created dashboards and reports that you can actually start just looking at and start getting instant value from. So that's the real push. If you're to like start with Splunk, just start with core, just start with search, and then gradually build your way up, and you'll get a lot of value from it.
To click on statistics, can you talk just a little bit more about kind of what you can do with under the statistics tab?
Sure. So a couple of things that you have here. The pivot table, this gives you kind of the capability to take data that you've already collected and do things like create more table-friendly or more business user-friendly UIs. We do have kind of inside of the events a lot of calculations already done for you. So if you look here, it'll actually give you things like the average, the min, max, standard deviation. And if you want to do things like, hey, I just want to see the top values, or if I want to see the average over time, you just click this button and you'll see this Splunk automatically put the search for you there. And then you can start modifying that search. So say, for example, I just want to go and do this and just look at all the web services things over time. You can see how they've done, and you can zero in on particular points of time. Time is a first-class citizen in Splunk, so we always make sure that time is something that is very relevant and very well tracked in Splunk. So all these timestamps are very, very important. But as I said before, you can go into find more apps, and here you can start looking for whatever your heart desires. Literally, if you look for Cisco or you look for Amazon, you'll see that these are kind of like, we call them apps, but what they are a good kind of collection of dashboard reports that give you the capability to, we actually did one back in the day, and this is still kind of relevant, being able to talk to the device right here that I won't say or else it'll like respond. So you can actually ask her, hey, how many incidents did we have in the last 24 hours? And she'll actually run a Splunk search and give you the results. So there's a lot of really cool things that you can do with Splunk. And it's all foundation level. You bring the data in, you start asking it questions. And what I do all the time is I leverage a lot of these apps that have really good searches and really good dashboards and just modify them. Just go in and start tweaking the searches so that they fit the need that I have.
We have another question on the chat and sort of related to what we've been talking about. Are there any templates or starter packs for Splunk into AWS? This particular person talks about their devs feeling like they always start from scratch. So they're looking for something of a starting point, repository for dashboard, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So inside of Splunk, you have this browser to go look for more applications. If you also go to Splunk Base, this will actually give you a lot of the kind of great places to start for dashboards and reporting. There's actually a sample dashboard. There you go. I can spell. The sample dashboard app is one that I will completely, say it out loud that I copy paste out of that thing all the time because it has so many valuable dashboard searches and examples that you can easily copy paste. It actually gives you the source data right underneath it. So it's very, very cool. And the other thing I do is I leverage a very tried and true method of search, copy, paste. So I'll go search for dashboards or how people do searches, copy what they've done, modify it a little bit, and paste it. I'm not a programmer by any stretch of the imagination, but I definitely know how to look for it. Use Google to my advantage so I can actually get stuff done. So I strongly encourage the community that we have around Splunk is incredible. So if you go to answers.splunk.com, there is a significant user base out there that is more than happy to help, answer questions or even kind of help you along with your journey. The next question I think I saw. Go ahead.
Can you write custom fields with regex?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I hate regex. I will say it over and over again. I hate regex.
I think I share your sentiment here. So
there was a cartoon I saw that they're like, you want to learn regex? And you have a cat? Just get a cat toy, get your cat to walk all over your keyboard, and there you go. There's regex. So the good news is that inside of Splunk, we actually have a WYSIWYG tool to help with this exact phobia of regular expressions. So if you go into here and you select an event, go to Event Actions and say Extract Fields, you can click this regex button, go next, and then you can select a field. Now watch this magic. We'll call this field test. Add extraction, and ta-da! Look, there's a regular expression for you. So I'm not gonna lie, I literally use this all the time. And here you can see that it'll actually go and look for the events, and it'll actually show you how many times it has seen and extracted that particular field from your event. And when you're ready to go, you can say, let's go next, next, and I'm going to make this app to finish. So now I can start looking at that field extraction that I just created. And you can see here's where all the field extractions are. So this is actually modifying your props transforms files through a UI. You can create new field extractions if you want, or you can open the field extractor there. But again, if you just go into search, we can actually start looking for that particular field. Once it decides to show up. So let's do more fields. There's field test. So there you go. See all of that without having to know regex. That's a major help for me.
So you can basically search for anything.
Correct. And then if you want to be really cool about it, you can create your own visualizations. So I was able to go right from not knowing regular expressions to a dashboard, and then go ahead and save this to a dashboard panel, and or create an alert. So very, very easy with Splunk.
Yeah, I might have to get one of those regular expression application or whatever that is. Just help me solve that problem.
Really cool.
I can't tell you how many times I've used that to cheat and get the regular expression I need to then just go in and start doing way more complicated searches. But I mean, I have tried, and I don't know what it is. I guess I have a mental block on actually being able to learn regular expression. I have tried, and I just do it.
I think we have another question in chat. What would you say is the most cost-effective architecture, keeping ingress and egress charges in mind, hosted EC2 heavy forwarders versus Splunk Cloud?
Good question. So when you're talking cost-effective, I mean, there's a couple of things you have to keep in mind. It's going to be first, what's your use case? What are you using Splunk for? If you're doing a lot of heavy search and a lot of parsing data and you have a lot of users hidden in the system, you're going to need to have a properly deployed infrastructure to support that search and ingest. The good news is that you can use just a single EC2 instance and do a significant amount of data collection and search. I think we have a couple of documented use cases where you can have like a standard EC2, so what we use in Splunk Cloud are the i3 instances. But as the service evolves, who knows what kind of instances we'll be using in the future. but you can use like a standard i3 or a C series or a T series or an M series and get significant indexing volumes from it if you're not hitting it very hard, very consistently with search. So again, it's going to really depend on what amount of data you're doing and how much search you're doing. But what I've seen is customers have leveraged a couple T series, T2s, T3s, and build on top of, and since Splunk kind of grows horizontally or scales horizontally, you just add more indexers as you add more data. So that gives you that good capability of being able to, add additional indexers when you add more data. We created, as of version 7.2, we had a technology called Smart Store that allows you to use S3 as a back-end storage. So you'll search the data in a cache tier, so the data is really fast, but the data that you're not searching actually gets evicted and gets put onto an S3 bucket. So that'll allow you to get the data, to get the real cost down, so you're not really spending a lot of money on like the long-term storage because you're shuttling off to an S3 bucket, but you're getting the performance because the data is actually staying in a very fast cache tier. And customers typically use like an i3. And we do have documentation on how to deploy this. We also have CloudFormation templates that can help you kind of deploy this as well. But most cost-effective way, if you're not doing a lot of search, you can leverage your C-series instances, and you just want to have the data for 30, 60, 90 days. Typically, a C5 XL or 2XL, I think it's up to 4XL, can probably do about 200-300 gigs a day with moderate search. So there are sizing calculators out there that can also help you kind of determine what this is going to be like. But obviously, again, I'd go default with, hey, look at Splunk Cloud 2. That'd be a good way to understand how to do your Splunk deployment. Let's see here. As far as egress charges are concerned, if you have a Splunk Cloud deployment and you are using heavy forwarders, today, the way that you would send that data into Splunk is over the public internet. Obviously, if you're sending into Splunk Cloud, the data coming out of your system is going to obviously, out of your VPC is going to be charged at the network egress charge. The good news is that the data coming out of your system is also compressed when you're sending it to Splunk Cloud. And on top of that, as long as you're in the same, obviously if you keep it in the same region, it keeps it, the network egress charges low as well. So that would be what I would leverage. EC2 instances for heavy forwarders, your C series are pretty good. M series are also pretty good. Our docs are tailored to the M series, and they actually do have a pretty good kind of documentation around how much those heavy forwarders can do. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, and then for folks that are just now tuning in, Cam, can you give us a recap of the Grand Central integration with Control Tower?
Sure. So Splunk Grand Central is an app that was built from the ground up to integrate directly with Amazon Control Tower. And what that allows us to do is create stack sets that will deploy data collection to all your AWS accounts based on organization units that they're up. So this allows you to collect the data and directly into Splunk serverlessly over HTTP event collector and Kinesis data firehose.
And so if I'm understanding this correctly, so from the master account, you are deploying stack sets at the OU level, right? To deploy all those all the resources, is that correct?
That's correct.
There we go. And so folks just now tuning in, this is Howdy Partner. This is the show where we like to highlight some of the cool things that our partners are doing. And today we have Cam from Splunk showcasing the Grand Central integration with AWS Control Tower. And so if this is your first time tuning into the show, make sure to like and subscribe for regular updates. And with that said, we do have a question.
Sorry. There was a question in the chat, and I can probably answer this one. Is there a place I can go to see the architecture diagram? I believe Cam had shared his GitHub repo link earlier in the chat. Cam, correct me if I'm wrong, that should be a place where you can find that architecture diagram you're showing there.
There it is.
And
So
let me just type that in one more time for all the, oh, there we go. I did it again, but basically that's the link that we shared where you can go in, kind of read up about what the Grand Central is, and then you will see there the architecture diagram you're also looking at in our Twitch show.
You're welcome. And so with that said, other than that, is there anything else that we should know about Splunk? Anything else we should know about this integration that would be helpful for folks that are looking for a solution to manage multiple AWS accounts at the same time?
Keep an eye on the GitHub. We're constantly updating it. Let me know if there are any questions or issues. Feel free to raise them here on the GitHub link. We are looking forward to any updates or requests to make this app better and help you move along with your AWS and Splunk journey.
And is there any features that are on the roadmap? I know these things are kind of always fluid situation, but if there's anything that we should look forward to as far as certain features in the works, anything else you'd like to throw out there regarding Grand Central? I know because I'm asking because it's a recently new integration, so.
Yeah, there's always something new around the horizon. One of the things that we're working on is being able to get better visualizations into the control tower UI. So, for example, collecting the number of guardrails, drift, and potentially having alerts or actions based on those drifts of whether it's stack sets that have drifted or accounts that have drifted, and being able to alert on that. So there are searches and there are dashboards that we're working on. Hopefully in a very near release, we'll be able to add that to Grand Central.
This has all been good stuff. I'm sure you guys have more questions for Cam, or maybe even questions for Young and myself. So make sure to ask these questions in the chat.
I find it ironic that it was definitely a thunderstorm.
Yes.
So. It's the cloud.
But Cam, other than that, if folks want to learn more about Splunk, or if they want to follow you on the socials, where can they find you, and where can they find more information about Splunk?
Good question. So a couple things. One, obviously Splunk.com, easiest place to go to get your fix on Splunk. I'm on the Twitters, a Miracle 19, since apparently Miracle was taken, and GitHub is probably the best place to get a hold of me with respect to updates or questions here. I also hang out in the Splunk user group Slack channel, so definitely feel free to join that. That's free to join. Answers.splunk.com is a great place to ask any kind of question. So not just myself, but other very smart Splunk peoples can help. We actually do have a free training course on Splunk. Let me see if I can get to it. This is going to be fun. Where is our... Here we go. There's a free course for Splunk if you just want to start. We do have a lot of really cool things like our certification handbooks. There's a free fundamentals class. We do have, I can't tell you how a good way to learn Splunk would be to go and actually just download and play with it. So there is a license that you can get, a developer license that you can get right here on the Splunk website. So get your free developer license. This allows you to have effectively a full version of Splunk that you can play with, that you can deploy on, a standard AMI or desktop computer you have laying around that's running Linux. It runs on Windows, but I'm a Linux bigot, so sorry. I would recommend running it on Linux. But yeah, you can do all that fun stuff.
Perfect. Oh, is there a Splunk certification exam?
Why, yes, there is. So you can go down multiple paths. So we have a couple different learning paths that can get you ready for Splunk, and then you can get yourself certified. A lot of these are very sought after certifications in the industry. Obviously, the Certified Enterprise Security Admin is probably one of the hottest ones out there, followed very quickly by a lot of the other certifications that we have available for our learning paths. But definitely go download it. That's the best way to learn Splunk. That's the way I learned it. I was forced to take the courses, which is great. But at the same time, I think the best way I learned was actually going out and doing it myself. Yeah, definitely after you do your AWS certifications, come back and take some of your Splunk certifications. 1-2 punch.
And I guess a quick question on top of that. For Grand Central, is that available under the dev account or dev license?
Yeah, you can install the Grand Central on a dev license. The only data that it's going to be collecting is the data that you send from AWS. So you can go download it, install it, and have it going.
All right. That sounds good. If there are any other questions in the chat, make sure to ask Cam. This is your chance. But if there are no other questions, obviously huge shout out to Splunk. You guys are doing great things. I think this integration specifically is going to solve a lot of problems for tons of customers, right? Shout out to Young, first time on stream. And yeah, I think this is great. It's a great time. So again, if you want to follow Cam, make sure to follow him on Twitter, GitHub, Splunk, or answers.splunk.com. And with that said, Cam, we always like to end the show with 3 different, I guess, goodbyes, if you will. You have the options of giddy up, come back now you hear, and then the last one is happy trails. So we'll let you decide on how we sign off the show.
Well, being that Splunk's had to do the standard plug, so Conf this year is a free event. So if you want to go register, good idea to go register for Conf this year. A lot of fun there. Our mascot is, check it out, I actually have a little thing here, is a pony. I don't know if you can see it, but Buttercup. So I guess giddy up is going to be the way I'm going to have to say, to close out this episode.
Before we do that, though, I just want to plug in for the next episode of Howdy Partner will be next Wednesday, actually, August 19th, which would launch Darkly. I will be back along with AM, so tune in for that episode as well.
All right. So with that said, we'll do a giddy up on 3. So 3, 2, 1, giddy up.
Giddy up.